Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray, your weekly fix of 10 minutes of ancient warfare ranting and raving, answering questions if I can. That's what I do. I answer a question from a reader, listener, or viewer. You can ask us a question. You can send me an email, murray@caravansaraipublishers.com, or even awa@ancientwarfare.com, ancient-warfare. Today's exciting day. I got a fan letter. Very exciting. Oh, sorry for the rustle into the microphone there. So that's what you can do. You can, of course, back us on Patreon, one of three different levels. You don't have to. You can send me a fan letter just from random in the blue. The address, PO Box 222, Belfield 2191, Australia, will get to me. Now, this is from James. Oh, I need my glasses for this. Love your show. Thank you, James. I have a thought to share on a well-known topic, the expression "the die is cast." I know you are an expert and speak Latin, and I am just a guy who loves history and thinks too much. No. I am just a guy who loves ancient history, military history, and thinks too much. Opera history too, but that's not this podcast. And I certainly don't speak and think Latin except very, very slowly and badly. But consider the words die and cast. What if he isn't referring to the dice game, but the process of making or minting coins? A die is the hard metal stamp that one casts by pouring molten metal into a mold or form. The die with the design on the bottom is then struck to make the coins. Hit very hard on top to imprint the silver disc underneath. Caesar says the die is cast, the decision has been made, I can't go back or change it. I'm sure it was Caesar's own fate on the other side. It's always bothered me that Julius Caesar would have made that decision by throwing dice. I know I'm wrong. Still love your show. There is nothing wrong with knowing you're wrong. Oh, that sounds philosophical. Love it. If he was speaking English, perfect. Die and cast, obviously the English terms for it, as opposed to the Latin. Don't know what the Latin is, proving that I don't speak Latin. The interesting thing, of course, is that there is a game in Roman terms where they do indeed flip a coin called heads and ships and heads, something like that. So there is a coin flipping 50-50 decision making process in the ancient world. Now this is probably going out there, and this is one of those I know I'm wrong, but it's a different kind of world. The 50-50 of flipping a coin obviously does not create a gambling probability. The house won't always win if you've got a 50-50 chance of being right. Now, I know I'm wrong, but on Anzac Day in Australia, which is the 25th of April, there is a game that is legally played in pubs after midday until sundown, only till sundown, bizarrely. It's allowed in several other parts of Australia. It got outlawed because it was so endemic and problematic, and that is the game of two-up. Now, in the game of two-up, you have a handle which holds two coins, and one is a head and one is a tail. Possibly tails comes from this game that was played largely by Australian soldiers in World War One. It does predate that, however, but I don't think it was called heads or tails then. The reason I think it's called heads and tails, and this could be wrong, and you're welcome to comment, is that on a Australian penny of the time, you had the head of the monarch, the king, and then on the tail you had a kangaroo. And as far as I know, there are no other tailed creatures on coins of that era. If you look at old-fashioned British coins, they've got Britannia on one side and the monarch on the other. So I believe, claiming this for Australia, which as a Kiwi is hard to do, but anyway, that you've basically got a head and a tail. Anyway, what you do is you have a head and a tail, you have the two coins, you flip them up, and you call heads, tails. Now, if two heads land, you win. If two tails land, and you called it, you win. If one of each lands, the house wins, which is where they make all their money, or it's just like a neutral hand that you then do it again. So there's much less probability that two heads and two tails will come in on that card. So I think that may well be where heads and tails came from. If you then go, okay, so if you've got a game where you're flipping two coins, there's even a 3-coin version of heads or tails, and there's a whole bunch of colloquial expressions that are still used in Australia which come from this game, even though it's only allowed to be played for one day of the year, well, half of one day of the year. So if you ever hear an Australian or anyone else say, come in spinner, that's from the game of Two Up. And there's lots of others. There's cockatoo as a lookout. They give the warning, because if you've ever been in Australia and heard the cockatoos cry, or indeed many of the Australian birds' cries, they're very loud, very obnoxious. And the whole point, of course, is the cockatoo warns you that the police are coming, because just like in the musical, come on, brain, the musical, just like in the musical, this game is illegal, and therefore, like the big craps game that you get in, forgotten, Luck Be a Lady Tonight, that show. Anyway, you've got all these terminologies that come into colloquial speech. We don't know where the game comes from, but I imagine in Roman gambling terms, because the Romans love to gamble, we've talked about that in terms of dice games, throwing two coins at once rather than just the one would allow a much better odds of the host of the gambling den to win. Now, there's no evidence of this. We do get evidence of ships and heads as a game. So I imagine that it would be that rather than just a flip of the coin. As far as I know, there's not any evidence of anyone making a decision by flipping a coin in that sense, other than your suggestion for the die is cast for Julius Caesar, which is that, the whole idea of it being in the hands of the gods, and that idea of, it's funny. The thing with Caesar is, I don't know that it's the whole 50-50 thing, that it's either I'm going to succeed or it's not, which is generally how we interpret it. And I think I spoke about that when we talked about the die is cast, as opposed to I'm taking my chance. But then, as again we spoke about, let the die be cast is let the decision be made. It is in the hands of the gods, and of course you believe in your destiny and all of that manifesting itself, as opposed to I'm taking my chance, I'm taking my shot, which is probably a much more modern version, especially post Hamilton, the musical. Lots of musical references today, and it's a really interesting one of let the dice fall where they may, as a sort of a much more modern take on it. Or is that an ancient take? Is let the die be cast saying let the die fall where they may? Maybe it is. So interesting. But I got a fan letter. I don't care. So I'm going to put you on my shelf. I do like that, much more text, obviously, than on a postcard, although there was a fascinating field of Coptic studies in the early 20th century where they would send postcards between London and Oxford, and there used to be multiple deliveries of postcards a day, so you could actually get a reply before the day was out if you sent your first message in the morning, which is kind of predating email. They even had abbreviations so that they could fit more text on a postcard, and they would cram these postcards with minuscule text, including lots and lots of abbreviations. If you've ever done chemistry, you know that 3 dots in a triangle means therefore, and rather than write things like because, it was B/C, which is very similar to text speak, I suppose. The one thing they don't seem to do in those is they don't replace words with numbers. So you wouldn't write B and the number 4, you would write B/F. So that's one of those things. Right, James, where can your letter go? Let's move this one aside, and we're going to put James's letter in front of lots of Cicero. Oh, there he is. He's over my right shoulder. Glorious. So, sorry to disappoint, but you did say that you knew you were wrong. If Julius Caesar was English, spoke English, the die is cast, perfect for striking, minting coins. I don't think it works in the Latin eacta est, but there you have it. Anyway, probably a short one. I don't think I've reached 10 minutes, but I'm just going to rant and rave about the fact that I got a fan letter, and therefore you can join me again for another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers. Thanks. Bye.